Evening, everybody, and welcome to this recording of the Managing Coronavirus in Your Setting webinar. This was our first broadcast live yesterday evening, Monday the 16th of March, and during which we managed to break Zoom, so the recording never really came through effectively. So I've decided to record it again today and obviously upload it through to YouTube so that you can see it. Yes, it's a very small picture of me, and you need to be very grateful it is, because I've been working since 6 o'clock and it's now 8 o'clock and it's not a pretty image, I have to say. So we're going to leave with the slides on the screen, but you can see who it is who's speaking to you, because I know that that makes a massive difference as well. So obviously I need to first of all give you our regular disclaimer. Those of you that have watched our webinars before know this one well and truly by now, that this obviously webinar is for general guidance only, and we're not giving specific advice on your specific situation. Always do please seek advice on any aspect of managing people if you are at all unsure. It is never worth the risk. So this is what I look like when I've had a bit of slack put on. This is me. I'm Imogen Edmonds. I am proud of my team of 5 wonderful girlies and boys, and I am the Managing Director of Red Wing Solutions. And we are going to be 16 years old in about 6 weeks' time. When I've started the business when my baby was 6 weeks old, and he was born on the 4th of March. So yeah, not far away before we are 16 years old. We specialise in day nurseries and preschools and out of school clubs across the country, but we do work with other people as well, and we do obviously have lots of conversations, and today I think we can safely say has been a day of lots of conversations. So the learning objectives for the webinar are as follows: that by the end of the webinar, it'd be really good, I think, if you understood a bit more about how to manage the impact of the coronavirus crisis in your setting from the perspective of employment, which is obviously where my specialism lies. So we're really going to stick to that this evening and obviously cover that for you. And understand the consequences of your actions in relation to managing that impact, because I think it's really important to understand that obviously these things have a consequence. Unlike this yesterday evening when we obviously had live questions, I have got prepared questions of things to answer for you this evening, and I might throw in some other ones that actually came up today, obviously in a live situation, because obviously much of what we were talking about last night had just been announced, and obviously today we've had 10 hours of what was announced being applied, so we'll be able to cover that. This really is the website that I would suggest you all subscribe to, which I discovered yesterday. So just like the DBS site, I think you can do that too as well. You can go on and say, yes, I'd like to receive updates, and I'd like to receive an alert when you've updated it on my email. And you can go onto this website and request the same. And it's really important, I think, to remain up to date as business owners. So do, subscribe, make sure you get the alert when it is updated, because this is really the source of your information about what's changing. I also think this is really important, and I will reiterate it again and again and again, is that we can only control the controllables. A lot of people are being obviously very, very affected by what's going on, and largely because obviously there's so much out of our control. So please only control what you can control. Don't worry about things that are outside of your span of control. Control those controllables and focus on what you can do and what you can control. So today, didn't say this last night, but today we made the decision to work from home from tomorrow, because that's something I can control. I can choose to make that decision. We'd already set up the girls with printers and laptops and what have you, so we can make that decision. So tomorrow, as of tomorrow at 9 o'clock, we are not working under the same roof, and we'll just see how that goes for a couple of weeks, shall we? And see how we get on. Look after your staff. Really, really can't stress this one enough. So important to look after your people. And as I just joked with somebody, whilst you can't go and give your staff a cuddle because of social distancing, your staff really are going to look after you and look after each other at this time. There's so much stress around. I can't emphasise enough how we do need to sit down with people and talk to them. And again, I think early years is really good at this, making sure people feel loved and supported, and obviously that you care for them and that you're interested in their well-being. Answer their questions as honestly as you can, which might be, I don't know the answer to that. And remember, as a leader, there's nothing wrong with saying to somebody, I just don't know, but I'll try and find out, or I don't know today, but I might know tomorrow, because people really respect and accept that. Please be calm in public and panic in private. because I think that's really important as well. Our staff need us to see us, in control and keeping our shit together. I was going to not swear tonight, but yeah, that one's leaked out already. And obviously make sure you're planning. You're getting out of your heads is really important. It's definitely something I've learned that, if I think about it, and try and remember it, then at 3 o'clock in the morning, he's going to tap me on the shoulder and say, you've not thought about me for a while. Please think about me. Whereas if you put it on paper, you haven't got the worry of forgetting it. So it's a way of processing information, especially with your senior teams. Get that plan together, get it out on paper, and then hopefully pop it to one side and go, well, it's done now. That's our contingency. We don't have to worry about it. We've thought about it. Make sure you also, be kind. Choose kindness, I think was really important. I mean, last month everyone was being kind, and yet the joke was that this month, we're all panic buying in the stores and not being kind at all, thinking about only ourselves. But, the one thing we can do right now is still be kind. And it was lovely to see Stephanie Bennett from the Curiosity Approach on the news this evening, and her nursery had done lovely letters for the local care home, because they could do that today. They could paint lovely pictures, and the children could send lovely mementos to say that they're thinking about people who are probably socially distancing themselves. So, it's lovely to be kind and to do nice things. And I think this is more important than ever. So again, what can you do to be kind? So this webinar was obviously first discussed to be run last Thursday. So that was the 12th of March. So some of the information that we talked about last night was obviously based on what we knew on the 12th of March, last Thursday. So on the 12th, we discovered that there was probably 10,000 infected people in the UK. And before I've just recorded this evening, we were told it was possibly 50,000 people who were infected in the UK. And that's how it's changed within, 3, 4, 5 days. We're told that this could last 15 weeks last Thursday, which again, I think was big news for most people. This wasn't going to be done and dusted and gone within a few weeks. And we're now in officially the delay phase, which is what the government moved into last Thursday. And delay phase obviously means about flattening the peak of the epidemic and obviously reducing the pressure on the NHS, because obviously we don't want them overwhelmed because of circumstances like that. So new restrictions that were placed on us last Thursday was obviously if you had a high temperature or if you had a new and persistent cough, you needed to self-isolate for 7 days. He also told us that older people need to not take cruises and the school trips were advised to cancel if they were overseas. Dear old Boris. And then as of last night at 5 o'clock, and it went on till gone 6, I think the advice was that, anyone in your household who has a high temperature, or if you have a new or persistent cough, or they have a new and persistent cough, you need to self-isolate for 14 days. So big news as of last night, big change for everybody. And very much the case was made that we need to increase social distancing. So where it's possible to work from home, we should, and we shouldn't attend pubs, restaurants and theatres. And I don't know if any of you saw last night, so many theatres immediately didn't put yesterday evening's production on and closed. And obviously we've got 2 theatres who are customers. That's 2, not 2, wasn't being rude. 2 customers who are theatres, and both of those, I believe, are closed today. I know one definitely is, but I believe the other one is as well. Very, very, very scary times if you're in the arts, because they very much are reliant on our support. Vulnerable people, the government told us last night, were anybody over 70. I'm fairly certain Boris doesn't think anybody over 70 goes to work, because again, lots of people have contacted us today to say that they have got employees who are over 70. Pregnant women, again, who knew that there was that many pregnant women in early years? Again, we've probably spoken to so many customers today about their pregnant women, everything ranging from, right, I'm pregnant, to, obviously, you're going to have to pay me for 3 months because I'm having a baby. So lots and lots of conversations about that. And I'm sure many of you are particularly worried about the women that you employ who are pregnant and what this means for them. Basically, the government said last night that those who are identifiable as vulnerable, and that included people who were recommended to have a flu jab. So my mum's 79, so she would be recommended to have a flu jab. Does she have it? Does she hell? But she would obviously be classed as being in that classification as somebody who should socially distance themselves. Teaching to my mother to use FaceTime this evening, hilarious. But yeah, absolutely important. And obviously women in employment and older employees, we just don't know. Professor Chris Whitty said that detail will be available and put up onto the website, and we've got to trust that that's what they're going to do. Self-isolate. So what do we mean when we say that an employee self-isolates? And I'm fairly certain, and I did say this with one of my clients earlier this evening, I'm fairly certain as a population, we can't cope with the difference between self-isolation and social distancing because they both begin with S after all. But we basically, if we're self-isolating, we're doing so as people who are perhaps living with somebody who has got symptoms, or we've got symptoms ourselves. We don't need to immediately ring NHS 111. They can't cope, so why ring? If our symptoms worsen, we're meant to obviously go online and fill out the Ready Reckoner. That will obviously tell us whether we're going to need to obviously speak to somebody, or whether obviously we're going to need to get hold of an emergency service. Guidance on the website is provided about self-isolation and what it really means. It doesn't mean going out to the shops. It doesn't mean carry on as normal. It means staying in your home, and it means having deliveries left on your door. And if you're symptomatic, not using the same toilet as other people or using it after them and then it being cleaned. It means not sleeping in the same bed as your partner. It means, if you're symptomatic, obviously, it means having your own cutlery, having your own plates, using the dishwasher at the highest temperature. It means so many things. And, we're all going to need to get familiar with that because that's important. So the advice for employers is that self-isolation equals statutory sick pay. So crikey, that couldn't be easier to work out, could it? And it's eligible now for anybody who is diagnosed or who is self-isolating in order to avoid the spread of COVID-19. And the government, if you remember, stood up quite quickly and said no one should be disadvantaged for doing the right thing, which obviously is to self-isolate and therefore receive SSP. And he announced very quickly that he would receive SSP from day one, not day 4. Bless, when Boris stood up and said this, I think it was on lunchtime at 12:30, poor old Sage Payroll probably went into a meltdown thinking, oh my days, how do we update Sage Payroll so that will work? For just coronavirus, not for anybody who's got a migraine or somebody who's got an ingrowing toenail. And so at the moment, we're advising our clients that obviously, if you've got somebody self-isolating for 14 days and you have been told you are to pay them from day 1, you're going to need to make an adjustment in order for that to happen, because the chances are your payroll software will not know what you're doing. People are advised to self-isolate will soon be able to obtain an alternative fit note. Again, we hope that's the truth, but that might not be the case. So if they don't get a fit note and they can't visit a doctor after 7 days, and they won't necessarily be able to get one from NHS 111, we are going to have to accept that somebody who has told us is self-isolating can potentially self-certify for 14 days, not 7, and we're going to have to accept that. We're told to be lenient, and we're told to be relaxed, and we're going to have to take a common sense view. As we'll say later, I'm afraid some people will possibly take the piss because that's the way they are wired. For others who are not eligible for SSP and this lower earnings limit of £118 a week is still applicable, they will obviously be able to claim universal credit or employment support allowance. And that is £73 a week is employment support allowance. Nothing I've heard this evening has told me that that's going to increase. But obviously there is a lot of funding being put into the economy this evening, which is what we wanted to hear. And there's obviously a potential that people will be able to go to their local authorities and claim hardship as well, which is important. And we all, those of us who can, need to still support food banks because obviously that's where people are going to go. So the duration of the outbreak, people will be able to not need to go to the usual routes to get their benefit. They'll be able to get benefit from day 1, not day 8. You have to be over 25 to be eligible for employment support allowance. And obviously you will be able to do it online, which is important for others to know. In terms of statutory sick pay, employers, businesses will be able to reclaim it, but we haven't had any information about how that reclaim will actually take place. We're waiting for what we're going to be calling, or what we are calling, emergency COVID-19 legislation, which I understood was going to be debated, I think, from Thursday this week. So it's imminent. It's very imminent for it to be debated in the House of Commons. So it's really important that we have that. SSP legislation is as old as the hills. I think Keith Appleyard worked out last night that it was 1982. 1982, crikey, I was 9 years old, and that's when the SSP legislation came on board. And at that time, businesses didn't pay SSP. It was paid for by businesses, but you were refunded by government. These days, you don't get refunded. So it's very old legislation. It's not built for the purpose of which it's now being used. And so we do need new regulations to tell us how to do these things. So I can't tell you how you will get your money back, I'm afraid. I've got to just tell you that you've got to pay it out and hope that you are going to get it back in a way that makes sense. Yeah, that's all we've got to do. Have faith that the way you get it back will make sense. You'll be able to get 2 weeks because someone's been off because of COVID-19. So again, it's not meant to cover the ingrown toenails, the migraines. It's meant to cover somebody who is self-isolated for up to 14 days for COVID-19 reasons. We should obviously keep massive records, and we will be releasing a form very shortly. Just need to do a little bit more work on it, but releasing a form for you to keep your records, because I think that's going to be really important. What we don't want is employers turning around and being told you can't claim because there's no record of what you've paid out. The eligible period for the scheme is obviously anything that started from absences from last Saturday, which obviously is important. So anything from Saturday onwards, with the law changed on Friday, and the government will work with employers to set up a repayment mechanism, is what we're told. Existing systems are not designed to facilitate employee refunds. Hell no. And to say anyone who's got payroll software, it tells you when you can pay, and it doesn't say to pay it from day one. So what could happen, and we don't really hope it does. So these are the things that could happen. So social distancing strategy, school closures, home working, and reducing the large scale gatherings. Well, we've already got this encouragement to homework. That was us as of last night. They've encouraged us not to go to bars, clubs, restaurants and theatres, and obviously that's seen a huge decline in those services overnight, many of them closing. I think all View cinemas or Odeons have all closed as of this evening. Whether they'll be in a position to reopen remains to be seen, doesn't it? But those things are massively important to the economy, massively important to us for our leisure. And it's good to see that the government is planning things to do to help those things, though I would say they haven't gone far enough. In terms of school closures, my view as it's the same as it was last night. I don't think there's any government appetite for school closures. Though it would be interesting to see if we end up with school closures via the back door, not the front door. Again, I was talking about clients, talking about this today with clients, where we are in Redditch. We have a 3-tier system. So we have a first, middle and high school, and one of our local middle schools, I think, is closed for years 7 and 8 from tomorrow because they do not have enough teaching staff because the teachers have all gone off today, sickness absence. Now, I think a lot of teachers are feeling very frustrated that obviously what's happening is meaning that they are being asked to go to work and they can't socially distance themselves from 30 pupils. And they feel obviously that, this isn't fair and this isn't right, and who can blame them? And a lot of people obviously in that sector may well be this morning waking up thinking, well, actually, we've got to self-isolate. We've got a child here that's ill, or we live with mum who's ill. So these are the things that we've got to do because she's showing symptoms or he's showing symptoms. So 14 days off for a teacher equals I can't go to work, equals those children might not be able to be taught safely. So the school might have to close for certain years, which is what I would call closure via the back door, not the front. We're changing every few days. So who's to say that by Thursday tea time, we won't believe that we are actually closing schools? We just don't know, do we? But we hope it doesn't happen. So some questions that I thought we'd ask last night to see if there was good answers to come up with. If I'm forced to close, will I be able to bring my well staff in? Well, we expect that obviously you will be closed to pupils, you'll be closed to children in the same way a school would be closed to pupils. And that will be obviously as part of social distancing. Does that mean that well staff can't get together? Probably not, but obviously you would need to observe social distancing if they did. But you could still bring staff in odd numbers to, carry out those jobs that need doing. You would be able to bring people in to collect work. You would still be able to come into the workplace. I don't think anyone's going to tell a PVI setting that you can't open your front door for your staff to walk in through it. I think training will be very important, and obviously training these days is often online, which is great. And so ultimately, it's a great way for people to be able to access training from any laptop, PC, iPad, and what have you. You might want to relax on how that happens. You might want to encourage new ways of doing that. You might want to set up Zoom calls. So I have to say, don't break it like we did, where your practitioners can share things that they've studied during the day with each other. You can set up virtual meetings and huddles and lunchtime love-ins so people feel together. There's lots of things you can do. I suppose in technology, there's no better time to be working from home, really, is there? I think we'd all agree. Question 2, would it be legal for me to cancel employees' annual leave? Now, that's one of the things we have been talking to employers about today. And, you know, I think we've always said it. Any employee who has to cancel leave that they've already authorised, it's shit, basically. It's not a nice thing to have to say to somebody, but it does need to sometimes be said. And this is one of these times. So if you do need to cancel holiday or leave, then obviously this is something you can do. And to do so, obviously, you need to give double the amount of notice of the leave to be taken. Equally, at the same time, I think people are coming back and saying, look, you know, I would like to cancel holiday, and we'll cover that in a later question. Question 3, what would we pay staff who are required to self-isolate? Well, as we say, we treat self-isolation as SSP. So you pay in accordance with their eligibility. If they're not eligible for SSP, you can't start paying them SSP. And we need to go onto the government website as to what self-isolating actually means. What would we do if someone refuses to come to work through fear? And again, this is really quite common. People are very anxious. And even today, there was lots of people suggesting that their anxiety meant that they felt that they should be off. So the first thing we always recommend you do from a HR perspective is to talk to the staff who are anxious, to try and understand where they're coming from, explain the government advice, which may not be what they watched on GMTV this morning, and reassure them that if they refuse, they would, and explain to them that if they refuse, they would not be entitled to pay, but if they became unwell because of their fear, obviously you'd treat it as any other sickness absence. And I think that's really important that people understand that they can't tell you that they're going to self-isolate. Self-isolation is something that happens because a criteria has been met. And obviously if they're pregnant and concerned about their baby and what it means and should they take 12 weeks off, you know, Boris didn't say that last night. Boris said that we should socially distance ourselves and that we should, if we're in that category, I don't know why I'm saying we, because that's definitely not me. But if we were in that category, you should take heed of his instructions to strongly advise that you don't go to pubs, clubs, restaurants and theatres, that you do sort of socially distance yourself from other people where possible. If your job allows you to work from home, that you do. He's not saying don't go to work for 12 weeks. That's not what he said at all. And actually he was saying it from this weekend. So it wasn't something you needed to worry about this morning anyway. But people might be scared of using public transport, and flexibility is key, isn't it? So, you know, if one of the things that you should do to socially distance yourself is to avoid public transport, maybe your employer can change your start time and your finish time so that you can share a lift with somebody else. And that's not being unreasonable. That's finding a flexible, workable solution that everyone can live with whilst we live in these very, very unusual times. Wanted to touch about cancelling holidays because my holiday got cancelled today. I have to say it was a relief because I couldn't get through to Centre Park, so it was handy of them to contact us today and say that they have cancelled. It was the bit about please refrain from calling customer services that made me giggle, because obviously they must be sick to death of people calling. But yeah, if you want to cancel your holiday, I'm letting staff cancel holiday. I'm saying, look, you know, what price flexibility? I'm afraid also what it does do is mean that I can then fix holiday in the future, which I might need to do, puts control back on the employer. But ultimately, yeah, let somebody cancel their holiday. Don't make them go and have 2 weeks that they don't want to have because they've lost their holiday because it's been cancelled by their airline or by their holiday company. You know, don't make people do that. And as I say, whilst they have no right to do that, don't insist that they go when they don't want to go. But equally, they can't expect just to rock up on the day that you expected them to be off. Communication is key to this, and really, really important. So make sure that people know what you're thinking and that you've asked them the question about what they want to do. Another question that I had from last night is, what is the difference between short-time working and layoff? And you'll know from my video from Monday morning that we call short-time working and layoff and short-time, and we call it lost. because it just is easy to remember. So short time is when you reduce your hours. So reducing your hours equals reducing your pay, and obviously it's a strategy to reduce your costs in a situation where you need to apply short time working. So short time might be that you work 3 days a week, not 5, or 2 days a week, not 4, and layoff is another way of describing that you have a workless day. So short time can mean that you can just work mornings but not afternoons, but you have no workless days because you had a bit of work every day. There's no limit on how long you can be laid off or put on short time, but you can apply for redundancy if you have too much of it. So if it's 4 weeks in a row or 6 weeks in a 13-week period, the employee can apply for redundancy, and then the employer only has a very short time to issue what's called a counter notice to say, don't worry, you don't need to apply for redundancy because we're about to lift layoff. It gets really complicated, so I'm not going to try and explain it this evening, but yeah, it's something that can and does happen. Question 7, what if I'm forced to close? What will I pay my staff? Well, technically, if you are unable for them to come to work, you are meant to pay them, and that's the way it works. You obviously can ask them to do work from home or to do other things other than come to work. As long as you pay them, there's no problem at all. But if you can't pay them, you need to lay them off, and if you haven't got layoff, all is not lost. You do need to get that agreement to lay off. Layoff means that you pay £29 a day, or from the 6th of April, £30 a day, and you can only pay this statutory guarantee payment, which is what SGP stands for a maximum of 5 days. If you work 3 days a week, you only get 3 times £29. If you work 5, it's 5 times £29 or £145 that you can receive. You only get SGP on the days that you are eligible to receive it, and if you have days where you get no SGP, you can apply for universal credit or employment support allowance, and you would do that online now rather than visiting the Job Centre Plus. And remember, employment support allowance is £73.10 a week. Would the government be able to close a childminder? We don't think they would, and we don't think they would for 2 reasons. A, obviously, there's not the spread of coronavirus potential around a large number, which there would be in a school. And B, in Ireland, they temporarily thought that they should close childminders, and then they changed their mind very quickly and opened them again. Question 9. What's the situation if we suspect someone is claiming the need to self-isolate in order to receive SSP, i.e. known as taking the piss? Unfortunately, we recommend you pay it, keep your records, because you will be able to reclaim the SSP for 14 days from the government, so therefore it's not in your interest to necessarily fight this one. However, we do recommend you keep your records because it might be something you choose to fight at a later date. Question 10. Can I tell my staff that a colleague may have potentially contracted COVID-19? Funnily enough, with the GDPR, people think that these things can't happen, but yes, you can, because you do have a duty of care to your other staff. Data protection doesn't prevent you maintaining your duty of care. So yes, you can, but I do think these days, from what we're hearing, is that less and less people are being tested, and more people will have assumed to have had it if they've had the symptoms. What we do obviously want to all have is more testing so that we do know one way or the other whether we've had COVID-19. Question 11. What is the process to claim this back and to claim for the day one? Previously we were told to ring 111 and they'd get a sick note, but now we're told there's no need. We don't know. We have to wait for emergency legislation to go through Parliament in order to know what we're going to do in order to claim back the SSP that we've got to pay for 14 days. We do recommend keeping records, and as I say, that's why we're working on a form to record the SSP you've paid out. Question 12. One of my members of staff is 64. If she was to self-isolate now and next week and has 2 weeks before Easter, can she claim SSP again after Easter? I want to protect her as she's in a vulnerable group. If she's symptomatic and self-isolated now, she would receive 7 days SSP if she lived alone, or 14 days. If she obviously lives with other people, and obviously there's a risk that obviously other people will contract the SSP. You would be able to reclaim that SSP for 14 days, which is obviously important. If she then has obviously a break and is fit to work again because of the Easter holidays, and then she becomes unwell again, she could potentially have more SSP, but you won't be able to reclaim it. You can, unless she's off again with perhaps a new diagnosis of COVID-19, we wouldn't be able to argue that the further absence was COVID-19 related if it had been broken up by an Easter holiday. What can we do? So we want to be part of the message to ensure that we improve hand washing and hygiene. It is the number one way in which we prevent the spread of the infection. I've heard of people being shot with a Nerf rifle if they touch their faces in some workplaces. I don't think that would work in a day nursery, but you've basically got to be on message with people. So we've had a lot of giggles in our office this last few days about, pull up a chair but not too close, make sure we're 2 meters away from each other, and all of that jazz. And it's really important. Make sure you keep up to date on the daily developments on that government website. It will be showing you when it was last updated, and do make sure that you're looking at it on a daily basis. Reassure those parents. Communication is really key, and show that you're in control with your parents and with your staff. You can take staff temperatures if you wish. You are probably best met to do so than many other employers. But, if you don't wish to do so, that's absolutely fine. And if staff don't want to take part in that, that's absolutely fine. Remember, you're not a nanny. You are their employer. And ultimately, it's their responsibility to say, I'm feeling a bit hot. Can someone take my temperature? And not for you to obviously be checking them at the door. Because if you did so, especially in my case, you might be quite shocked at the reading you could achieve, especially if I've been running somewhere. Consider your approach and who you'd approach if you needed to do a deep clean. I think knowing who your contractors are and people that you might trust would be really important at this time. And that's part of your business continuity, business contingency, isn't it? Prepare for the possibilities of high-level absence. Well, how are you going to manage? How few could you operate with? Who could you use? Which volunteers would come in and help you out should you need to be helped out? Can other nurseries help each other out? Again, I think kindness is really important. Now's not a time for local rivalry. How can we keep each other's businesses open? Really, really important. Think about how we approach people who are anxious and stressed, because there is a lot of it around. A lot of people are losing their minds over this and are getting incredibly upset and incredibly anxious. We've got to be part of obviously helping people to process what they're feeling and understanding. And I think social media is fantastic, and I think 24-hour news is fantastic, but there is absolutely a relentlessness to what's going on at the minute. Make sure you're consistent in your message to those who are self-isolating. So, you don't want them working from home if they're self-isolating. If they're receiving SSP, why are they working? Hey, what's all that about? But, we do need to obviously be realistic. We're now asking entire families to self-isolate. We're asking whole households to go home. It may not be unreasonable for them, obviously, to work from home. It's just a question of how do we label this and how do we record this? That coronavirus helpline, which obviously is really important. This is the Department of Education call number and email number. Specialist advice, particularly for you as an early years provider or as a school. Again, really important. Should obviously you have a proven case of COVID-19 in your setting and you need to speak to somebody, or you need to speak to somebody because obviously one of your parents has been diagnosed with it or what have you. And obviously, how can we help you? So again, we're here to help at Red Wing Solutions. If we can be of any assistance to you, you can pick up the phone and purchase a phone call via our website and pick up the phone and be able to talk us through any issues. You can join our HR for Early Years Club, which there's no contract, there's VATs included. It's there to help you, which is obviously the easiest way to become a member of our gang, if you like, and an Early Years Club member. We also obviously do further ad hoc support and further retained support where we take care of everything for you. We do HR, not duvets, and if you don't know who's swinging your pants, Simon and Trevor are, then I'm ever so sorry that you don't understand the reference. But yeah, we do no duvets, but we do HR. We do retained HR, ad hoc HR, and we sell things via our shop. And that's a little code for Redditch. If you need anything, you can come along and give us a shout. And whilst we're home working, that phone number still works with the powers of the mighty internet. Anyway, I'm going to upload this to YouTube so that we can help as many people as possible. Hope you found tonight's recording and video useful. If you can be of any assistance to you, give us a shout. Let us know that you need our assistance. Bye-bye.